stay relevant in the marketplace, organizations have to divide the work into three categories: work that will be done by technology, work that will be done by humans, and the third category is work that will be done by humans with technology. My name is Abhijit Bhaduri, and this is exactly what I do for my clients. I help them figure out which of the pieces of work has the highest strategic value when you do it with technology, and what is the work that you could do with technology, but you don't want to do with technology. You're better off doing it with humans. So, talent and technology are the two factors that shape the world of work, and this is what the show is all about. So, let's get started. Paddy, what a delight to have you here. And for the benefit of all our listeners, we are recording it on the day when, in a few hours from now, India is going to be meeting Germany in the semifinals, And this is really what mental toughness is all about, Paddy, that you are, doing this interview at a time when the team is, going to be preparing for a big moment. So,
Yeah.
thank you so much for being here. And let's get started with your background. You've worked in a range of sports. You've coached in rugby, you've coached in cricket, you've coached in hockey. Give us a run through. And you've worked in, Pakistan, you worked for India, you worked for South Africa. I mean, truly, truly global career as a coach. You've written a book. So there's lots to unpack there. So let's get started. Uh, how did you get started on a career as a mental coach?
Yeah, thanks very much, Abhijit, for having me on the show. And you're quite right, it's an exciting day as Indian hockey team contends for the semi-finals this evening against Germany. I think one of the things, once you've got a bit of baldness and grey hair, we start to accumulate a little bit of a CV. So without going to too much detail, I started out fortunately I got my first ever job while I was still at university was in international cricket. And I actually happened to be the first ever strength and conditioning or fitness coach in international cricket back in the mid 1990s. At the time, interestingly, every professional international cricket team in the world only had three support staff members: coach, a physiotherapist, and a manager. And I was the fourth introduction, thanks to Bob Woolman, Hansi Cronje. I was busy doing a master's in sports science. I was in the Western Province squad for cricket. I was playing some really good rugby. So my exposure into international sports started early at the age of about 23. And I spent 5 or 6 years as a strength and conditioning coach in professional cricket, and then moved over to professional rugby. And very soon realized that even if the bodies and the cricketers I worked with, the rugby players, were super fit, I still felt we were delivering way below our potential. And I knew something was missing. I didn't know what it was. I didn't know where to look, but I'm always hungry to learn. So I went in search for the answer, which took me through a couple of different paths and a couple of different businesses that I started, to the point where I came across a second master's degree in business coaching or leadership coaching. And in studying business coaching, that's when the lights went on for me. And I realized how particularly the sports world and a lot of legacy businesses, they weren't upgrading their leadership and coaching software to pace the change, and particularly the advent of the internet and now artificial intelligence. We were still using very old school methods of leadership, of coaching, of enhancing human potential. So that's when the lights went on for me. I was really initially interested in coaching coaches and coaching leaders to upgrade their software from the industrial era to the knowledge age. But what happened, so many coaches and leaders weren't open to really changing their approach. They had been doing what they were doing for 10, 15, 20, sometimes longer, and they weren't ready and open to change the old story. There's a lot of old dogs that you can't teach new tricks. And the gap opened up for me when an international cricket at the time, Jacques Kallis, he had been 14 months without scoring 100. I knew him well. I knew his personal circumstances. I phoned him and I said, Jacques, let's have a cup of coffee. I think I've got some stuff that can maybe help you. And while Jacques was always going to come back to form and score runs, it was just fortuitous for me that after a few of those conversations, the very next test series against the West Indies, he went from not scoring 114 months to scoring 105 consecutive test matches. And that really opened up, and other people started to get to hear. Jacques spoke publicly about it, and that accidentally kicked off my mental coaching career. And that was over 20 years ago. And since then I've worked in 16 different sports at the highest level as a mental coach. But then another important, significant change happened in about 2013 when cricketer Rahul Dravid phoned me and said, Paddy, him and I had worked together a lot when I worked with the Indian men's cricket team. He understood that while I was there as a mental coach, my real passion was leadership, coaching, and how can we create environments that bring even better engagement, performance, discretional effort out of individuals. And Rahul said to me, this Rajasthan Royals cricket team, we have half the budget of all other teams when it comes to buying players. So we bottom of the log, we're underdogs. Instead of coaching coaches and leaders how to coach, why don't you come and be the head coach of this team? And at the time, I had only one first class cricket match experience, so I didn't have any cricket playing credentials to lean on. I didn't have any coaching credentials. I had no interest in being a cricket coach. But what Rahul put to me was fascinating, to actually come and do what I was coaching other coaches to do. So I said yes, and I was lucky to get the position as head coach of the Rajasthan Royals. And I used a completely different, I turned the coaching approach in professional sport totally on its head. In fact, in the interview, when I was asked, you're obviously not a head coach and you'll get in expertise that you don't have, a batting coach, a bowling coach, and a fielding coach. My answer was, actually, my prerequisite before accepting the job is I want no batting coach, no bowling coach, no fielding coach, and no fitness trainer. I want no experts on the coaching staff of this team that has been at the bottom of the log for 4 years, and I arrive with no coaching experience. Because I was going to use the intelligence that sat in the team, the experience that sat in the team, and have a purely player-driven team. Yes, I have skills in facilitating, so I wasn't going to abdicate everything to them. And we turned that team around, broke records that first season, made finals, made the Champions League finals. And that kicked off an 8-year career of I spent traveling around the T20 cricket world as something of a maverick head coach, using an approach where I empowered players and I extracted the knowledge from in the room, as opposed to imposing my knowledge that I didn't have onto the room. So those are sort of some parts of my journey as a fitness coach, as a mental coach, what I still do a lot of now, but I also have had the experience of being a head coach. So I've seen performance at the highest level from a number of different perspectives, and that's just the half of it. Probably the other half of my time over the last 20 years has been applying the same leadership, high performance, mental coaching thinking into the corporate space in all different industries, in a number of different continents.
So you got into Rajasthan Royals team where they were the underdogs. You didn't want any other facilitators or coaches out there, not for batting, not for fielding, and you were yourself a novice. Do you
Yes.
think that was the reason why it worked well? Because
So
when somebody is really at the rock bottom, you can only go up.
Well, they had been at the rock bottom for 4 years and they'd had different coaches. I think what really worked is up until then, and still to a large degree to this day, you had coaches coming in as the expert, imposing their strategy, tactics, ideas on the team, and the team's job was to follow instruction. The reality is T20 cricket was a brand new product, a brand new version of the game. It didn't exist prior to 2007. So 2013 was only 6 years into this very new format of the game, and there was no coaches at the time who had experience of T20 cricket. The people who were most experienced were the players themselves. And I firmly believe that was the knowledge that needed to be employed, because that's where the knowledge sat. And I think it's very relevant to a lot of businesses, particularly the newer businesses today, where people who are getting their hands on experience very often know more about what's happening at the coalface than a 55-year-old male leader who finished their studies 30 years ago and has got 30 years of experience, but that experience is in a pre-internet, pre-AI, pre-technology era that is no longer relevant. It's now the experience that's required in leadership roles is experience in people management, culture management. It is the people side that is important, because the technology is there, the knowledge is there, and it's freely available to anybody with an internet connection today.
What are the building blocks of your strategy when you say mental toughness? What do you do with a team when you get started on day one? What is your strategy and plan for the team? Let's talk about the Indian hockey team. And I know that one of the things that you've done is to actually do very unconventional things like taking them to the Alps, some of the hockey teams, and you've taken them to the Alps to get over their mental limitations. Tell me more about that.
So, probably the first conversation that I'd have with any team that I start working with is separate the performance from the person. And for me, that's probably the most important mental conditioning step to take and right up front. Because when it comes to performance, the two biggest mental obstacles to success in sport, and I hazard a guess in business, is some version of pressure and some version of stress, anxiety, fear. Those are the biggest mental obstacles and the biggest challenges. And both pressure, fear, stress are a direct result of us placing too much attention on an outcome. Pressure comes from the amount of value or importance we place on a positive results and success. Fear and stress comes from the amount that we fear doing badly or things going wrong. Both of those are as a result of an attachment to something that might happen in the future. And one of the best ways to overcome that is to separate who I am from what I do. And that's what I do with athletes, is who you are as a person that lasts a lifetime. That is one of the most fundamental and important building blocks to continued and sustained success at the highest level. Because when you're comfortable with who you are, you know who you are, you've got good levels of self-awareness. In fact, I'd go so far as to say any leadership course today worth its salt will spend probably more than half of the time working on self-awareness as opposed to techniques, tactics, and strategies to lead others. That's really where it all starts. And the same thing with athletes. It's an athlete who is comfortable within themselves, they're secure within themselves, they have high levels of self-esteem. They really want to win, but they're not desperate. And it's the desperation to win that causes pressure. And when you're comfortable with yourself and you're not terrified of losing or terrified of mistakes, because you know, I'm still the same person, I'm okay, I want to try my best, I want to win, and I really don't want to lose, but I'm not desperate to win, and I'm not terrified of losing. But someone who doesn't have high levels of self-esteem, they then end up very often relying on confidence. There's a very much of an ego orientation, and the ego desperately wants to do well in order to get acknowledgement, and the ego is terrified of doing badly because of the criticism and looking bad. And when we operate out of ego, we are attached to results, our mind gets stuck in the future, and that system or mechanism is actually what undermines performance, particularly in the big moments.
When you look at some of the younger players who are getting started in their career, and a team will have a combination, some younger players, some more experienced players, who do you think carries a greater amount of burden of performance? Is it the younger ones, or is it the experienced ones who have a reputation, or the younger ones who are trying to build their reputation? Who carries more of that performance pressure?
The person that carries the biggest performance pressure is the person who's most concerned about what other people think. Some senior players are really influenced by other people, by social media, by the media, by desperately needing compliments and scared of criticism. And that might happen with the younger person. So it's not so much younger or older, it's who's more attached to what other people say. Conversely, who is more comfortable within who they are and finds their motivation, their inspiration from within. It's the externally referent person versus the internally referent. And what I'm looking to do is to get people to become more and more internally referent and listen to the voices that count as opposed to the voices that don't count.
You've written a book, which I will confess I have not read, but which is called The Barefoot Coach. And talk to me about what did you share in that book, The Barefoot Coach.
So the book was really, I wanted the book to be something that would really convey practical experiential lessons to the reader as a result of sporting stories. So there are a lot of sporting stories and predominantly cricket stories, but it's not a cricket book. It is my personal experiences with athletes from inside the change room, but it's not an autobiography. The idea is that it's an easy read. It's not overly theoretical, overly technical. It is very anecdotal, but in every chapter, my hope was that someone would really want to continue reading, but they would stop and say, hang on a minute, I need to think about this. I think there's some valuable lessons for me in my life. And probably the biggest success for me is hearing that some management schools, some universities have adopted it as reading for their postgraduate management degrees, and there's some courts who actually have it as prescribed reading for new managers. That's really what I wanted the book to be, for the discerning reader who wants an easy read to learn some really good performance, coaching, and leadership lessons. And life lessons. These are all fall under the umbrella of life lessons.
What are some of the things that you talked about? If there are a couple of them that you can briefly share, that would really benefit our listeners and me. What is it that we can do to build mental toughness? What are some of the starting points? How do we go about doing it?
Well, the starting point, and I started this in the book, and as I said, with athletes that I work with, this is my starting point. It's personal mastery. Let's not rush to professional mastery to be the best athlete or AI or salesperson or marketing or HR person I can be. Let me start with the personal mastery. And there's some very simple, fundamental principles of personal mastery that is relevant to everybody, whether you're a business person, a housewife or house husband, a scholar, or even at school. So personal mastery is the place to start. We are the instrument. Whatever work we do, whatever sport we play, we are the instrument through which we execute our task, our skills. And like any musician would do before they start playing music, they fine tune the instrument and they make sure that music is able to flow freely through it. And that's the first port of call: is stop, look in the mirror, ask yourself, why am I doing this? What do I want out of this? What are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? Who are the support people I need? Who are the mentors that would really help me? How can I become a better version of myself? And I know that is such rhetoric that's out there that some people roll their eyes back when they hear that. But the reality is, you are the instrument of what you do. Start by fine-tuning yourself as the instrument. And when we do that, so many of the mental obstacles that we end up facing actually just disappear. So when you're comfortable with who you are as a person and you know what you want to accomplish and you give your best effort in the process towards achieving that, knowing that you might not achieve success and you will have failures along the way, automatically just that mindset, it reduces the amount of pressure you feel, it reduces the amount of fear you have of failure, and it frees you up to be able to fully express your talent, your skills, and your creativity. And when we express that, we naturally navigate the difficulties and the bumps fairly easily, and we naturally achieve high heights. And when we achieve success, don't think that you're the finished product and you're great. You're not. You were just lucky and things worked well this time. Tomorrow it's going to be a new day. You keep going. And it's the same with failure. If you fail, it doesn't mean you are a failure. It means today things didn't work well. We always knew there were going to be bumps along the road. Tomorrow, pick yourself up and stay on the learning journey, which is an upward learning curve. That's probably the most important thing: is success or failure are equal teachers of lessons. We just tend to scrutinize failure for lessons, and people say you learn more from failure than success. Rubbish. Or we do learn more from failure than success because we scrutinize failure and we celebrate success, and you learn more from scrutinizing than you do celebrating. But the lessons available are equal in failure and success. We're just not that good at extracting lessons from success. But really high performing teams and individuals extract lessons from both, and they move on and apply those lessons.
When you are working as a coach to a team, and let's imagine that they've had a good day and they have had a bad day, could be either or, and they are back into the dressing room, what is your conversation with them? What do you do with them when they either have had a, especially if they've had a terrible day?
So my process will be the same whether we win or lose. First of all, my energy, my emotions will be pretty much the same. Because even if we have a bad day, there's some people who've had good individual experiences and performances. And even if we've won a game, there's some people that have had a bad day. If I'm talking team sports now, and it's the same in a business context. So what I will do is I will individually go and celebrate the people who've done well. I will definitely make sure that everyone who's had a bad day, they get a word, they get some confidence, they get some love, they get the arm around the shoulder from me. Either way, we don't do much talking immediately after the game because emotions are high, whether it's, as I said, it'll be disappointment, anger, frustration if we've lost, or happiness if we've won, but there's always athletes who are different. Finish the day, say, guys, leave it. Let's go and do whatever we do. Take care of our recovery. That's the most important thing. Whatever eating, whatever massages, whatever ice baths, good sleep. And let's meet tomorrow and we'll talk about what we learned from today. And it's the same every time. Win or lose, we make sure we recover well, and we only talk tomorrow when the emotion is out of it and we can rationally look back at it and extract lessons, as I said, from both what we did well and what we could do better next time. And it's too often we talk about what can we learn from what we did badly or what went wrong. That doesn't sit very well with most people in their head. It creates a defensiveness when we talk about what went wrong or what went badly, and we tend not to get good lessons and good information when individuals are on a defensive mindset. The language, I would say, is what could we do better next time? Because that directs people's thinking to the future and it directs people's thinking towards success, as opposed to talking about what did we do badly. That directs our attention into the past and into failure. And that pricks the ego and creates defensiveness, justification, explanation, and blame. And while those things are happening, the mind contracts and learning doesn't happen. So the same thing, if someone missed a tackle or did something that wasn't ideal and was consequential, I will say to them, next time you're in that situation, directing them to the future, what would you do differently? Directing them towards a solution. And that activates a different part of the brain, and there is no defensiveness, no explanation, no justification, no blame that is invited by that question, compared to why did you make that mistake? What were you thinking? It's not smart, that.
This is pretty much like what they say. Feedback is actually all about looking back and saying, well, that happened, and here is what I should have done, could have done. But when you do feed forward, you are looking at, if you're in a similar situation, what's a different option that you could exercise. So it's really that element that we are talking about. I also,
Yes, correct.
another big takeaway for me was, the first thing that you do is really like work on self-awareness, because without that self-awareness, it's hard for you to actually work on anything and everything. So is that self-awareness something that you build within the team? So, it's one to many, or is it you work with the players one to one? Which way does it go?
So it's all of the above. Self-awareness, I will do exercise where I ask players to write things down for themselves. And then when it's fairly confidential, when it's fairly sensitive, I'll always say, write it down. This is for you. I'm not going to ask you to show it to anybody or share it with anybody. So that frees people up to fully express themselves and actually interrogate themselves. There are other times where I'll say, go and sit with somebody and share information with somebody you know very well within the team. And that's helping somebody see themselves through somebody else's eyes, and information is shared, but the sensitive stuff will tend to be withheld. And when you get really mature individuals in a mature team, you can have individuals standing up and actually owning, for example, when just a very simple example that happens with generally only very experienced athletes who are secure within their position in the team. When they make a mistake, this is when I know somebody has reached a really high level of maturity. They put their hand up in the team meeting when we're, for example, debriefing again and somebody has missed a tackle or attempted a shot that wasn't really that smart. They put their hand up before it's pointed out and say, guys, in this particular incident, I made this mistake. And in hindsight, I realized this is what I was thinking that led to that mistake. And in future, if I'm in that situation, this is what I would do differently. And the key piece in this that seldom happens is when somebody makes a mistake, which means they do something they ordinarily wouldn't do. It's almost always preceded by some thinking. So the mistake in execution actually starts with a mistake or an error in thinking. And when somebody's able to reflect and say, this was the thinking that was going on for me that led to me doing that, that's where we start getting the gold. And certainly at the highest level in sport, almost every mistake we see on the field, the video, the data, the analysis all goes to, and we can have very detailed analysis of the error, of the technical error. But there is nothing that the video can capture or any data point can capture that suggests what was the thinking that preceded the error. And that's one of the most important conversations that very often coaches and leaders miss. And fortunately, as a mental coach, that's who I go to with the players. Say, it's okay, the mistake happened. Let's talk about the thinking, because if we can intervene at that level, we can then start programming the correct thinking that will lead to the correct execution that you do 9 out of 10 or 19 out of 20 times anyway. Let's just keep you on the focus path and identify your distractions.
In businesses, we also need to have similar kind of mental coaches for senior leaders or maybe entry level people. And if so, why has that not caught on in business?
Somebody who wants to really progress and do well in sport or business will not be able to do it, or very seldom by themselves. We need good mentors, or we don't need them, but they really help. Having a coach, the best athletes in the world all have a coach. The coach is not better than them at that sport, but it's somebody to hold them accountable, to have the difficult conversations, to give them feedback, to create the trust where they can receive that feedback. So everybody who wants to accelerate their career would benefit from feedback, from help, from feed forward, from some form of coaching. Now, it doesn't necessarily have to just come from a business coach. As long as they're getting the input, the support from somewhere, somebody has, it's so important to surround yourself with somebody who will disagree with you, but give you good reason, good information. So yes, everybody would benefit from having that. And one of the reasons why people are still a little bit reticent is in some countries and in some cultures, when a person makes a mistake, it's a career limiting move to own up to that mistake. And when you're in a culture, and many business cultures or many business environments, when somebody makes a mistake or you have a bad quarter, there is a witch hunt that goes on, and the people who are most deemed to be most responsible are the people who are fired or penalized for it. And in a culture like that, that then creates an environment where people are very reticent to own up, to ask questions when they don't know, to say I don't know, because could be career limiting. And that kind of business and that kind of culture is simply not going to produce high performance, and in a cutting edge industry is not going to survive very long, compared to an industry or business, and it is always led by the leader who leads in a way that is mature and says, we know mistakes happen. We want to have conversations about them. We want to learn from them. But ideally, when a mistake happens, there are people who are aware before the time that something is going wrong. Something's a little bit out. And too often in a business environment, people are too scared to say anything. And very often it's because the leader is not open to critical feedback. And we know from research that the more successful leaders and the more successful teams tend to be less and less open to feedback, because they think they've got it all figured out, and they don't like voices of dissension. And if there are leaders out there who don't like hearing things that they don't like hearing, I would say there's a leadership red flag for you. You need to be open to hear the things that you don't like hearing. That is the only way we're going to keep advancing and improving, is hearing the stuff that is difficult to receive. That's when we know we're firmly on the path of personal and professional mastery.
How do you manage to stay calm? Today, for example, is a big day for the Indian hockey team. Are you nervous?
Um, I'm not so nervous at the moment because the game is still a few hours away. What I would always do on game days, I always go and do some really rigorous exercise. So I go and burn off a lot of energy. Exercise, yeah, I burn off energy. It leaves me feeling in a really good and comfortable place. And then at the game, what I really look to focus on is our process, because that's the language we would use in the team. the process, one play at a time, is what we need to get right. And if we get one play at a time and have all our attention on one play at a time, the result will then look after itself. And if we get all that right, we've got the best possible chance of winning. It doesn't guarantee that we'll win. And if the team loses, while I'm disappointed, but that's my leadership ego that is now being piqued. If I'm disappointed, upset, frustrated, angry, I'm making it about me. And I have made that mistake as a coach before, early in my career. And when I feel disappointed or upset, what I immediately do is look to the players and go, well, if I'm the coach who's on the side of the field, can you imagine what the players must be feeling? What about the people who are responsible for the plays that might have compromised the performance? How might they be feeling? And as soon as I start focusing on the others and the players, my anxiety, frustrations, disappointment, everything disappears, and it turns into compassion. And then I will go and act that compassion and caring and love out with that player. And it turns losing into a really uplifting human experience. And the feedback that I get from players, and I can really advocate this to leaders, is when you give somebody love who really needs love at a time when everybody else is pointing fingers and criticizing, that's when you earn a lifelong follower, supporter. You get loyalty from that person when you give them what they actually need and make it about them, not about yourself.
Paddy, thank you so very much. It's been such a delight learning from you, and good luck to the team. Good luck to you. And we look forward to many more successes that you will bring to the teams.